graphs or something on the screen? Am I allowed to do that?
Absolutely. I'm going to make you a co-host.
Cool.
You should see the invite any minute.
I think I'm good. I
We're
think
set.
co-host. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
very nice to meet everybody. Very nice to be with you. I have actually driven through Joplin over the summer and believe that I stopped there to get a coffee and some gas when my um, I got married over the summer and my wife moved from the West Coast to Michigan where I live. And so we drove right through there on I guess it'd be 44, right? Does that
Yeah.
sound right? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Sure
I'm
enough.
not yeah, so not super familiar with Missouri, but I've driven through and yeah, and shopped for real estate all over, but I don't have anything in Missouri. I have been investing in real estate for like 6 or 7 years, like kind of intentionally, not just here and there, really. And then over the last the 3-ish years, really trying to grow the portfolio. And as probably a lot of people on this call figured out, that get serious about growing your portfolio, it's hard to do because you quickly run out of money, and it's you get to a point where it's time to start raising money from other people. And probably a lot of people on here have heard about syndication, and so I had heard about syndication and thought that that model made a lot of sense. There are some upsides and some downsides to it, and better and worse ways than do it. But in general, the idea of pooling people's talent and resources together in order to go out and buy valuable properties as a group, that was something that made a lot of sense to me conceptually. And so I did some syndication for multifamily deals. And then 2021, 2022, prices just go straight up for multifamily. And of course, I'm out there with everybody else trying to buy an apartment building, but the prices are just too high. And I know that I want to be able, if I'm buying an apartment building, especially with other people's money, I'm always thinking about, am I going to generate a rate of return that exceeds the S&P 500? Because people can sit at home and put their money in an E-Trade account and over the long term, maybe get 8 to 10% on it. So am I comfortably going to be able to beat that? And then the second question I ask myself is, am I going to be able to get people a rate of return that's better than if they invested their funds with another syndicator, somebody else that's out there buying apartment buildings that's been doing it for 20 years? And the answer to the second question I found was no. I didn't have any special edge. I was out there like everybody else looking for apartment buildings, and the prices are really high. I couldn't get any diamond in the rough art off market deals. I couldn't get better debt terms than the big guys had millions of followers on social media they could raise money from, and I didn't have that. And so I thought, well, this is just time to take a pause, but was still shopping, of course, for real estate. But in syndication, it was hard. And I'm kind of thankful for that, because now a lot of these guys that became big quickly in the syndication space, they've got adjustable rate mortgages, and they're in trouble as interest rates have risen, and they bought a lot of big apartment complexes with high interest rate bridge debt. So I was at a multifamily conference, and a guy, actually the best ever conference. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that, but it's great to go to if you're into multifamily. I think it's in Seattle, no, Salt Lake City this year. And I would recommend it. I would recommend it if it's on your schedule. Best ever conference. And I go to that, and I meet a guy that lives about an hour from me in Michigan, and he says, "Have you seen this Baymont hotel for sale?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really looking at hotels. And as a matter of fact, hotels are not the place to be, especially post COVID. And kind of like 2 and 3 star hotels are not really the place to be in general. A lot of people are using Airbnbs, etc. And it's not like families really go on vacation and stay at the Motel 6s like they did 20, 30 years ago. So that's kind of an obsolete product, I think, that's falling in value. And I don't keep up with old hotels that are for sale. And he says, well, I think it makes a lot of sense as a conversion. I think this hotel could be purchased and converted. And I thought to myself, that sounds like, and pardon my language, Chris, I was like, that sounds like a huge pain in the ass. Like, I'm like, you want to turn the hotel to an apartment building? And he's like, yeah, I think it could make sense. Let's go look at it. And so, I was trying to be open-minded. I wanted to go and look at a hotel, and you can always learn something, right? Going on a tour, but that, but I thought you've got to get a kitchen in every room. You've got to convince the seller to take the franchise off the hotel. Because like these Motel 6, Days Inn, Baymont, Hampton Inn, Best Western, these kind of like 2 and 3 star hotels, they're all franchises. You got to convince the franchise and by the way, you got to pay liquidated damages to cancel your franchise contract early. And then you got to do this complicated construction. And then you got to go to the city and get potentially a zoning change approved. And I had no idea how you do that, and then you've got an empty building that you got to lease up from zero. And then you got to find some bank that's willing to lend you money on a building where you're going to take the income and drive it down to zero before you build it back again. I thought this sounds like just a big pain in the ass, and it could take years, and who knows if it even works. And long story short, so I went and looked at that hotel, and then I'm going back, I'm running the numbers, I'm in front of my computer, I'm on Excel, and in conclusion, I realized like I couldn't find the error in my Excel sheet. This hotel made so much money, converted as an apartment. I couldn't find the error. And I stayed up almost all night poring over the economics of the deal. And I came to understand that all of those problems I just named off, like they're problems, but they're problems that are worth figuring out how to solve. And really, as like real estate investors, what we do is we just get really good at putting numbers on problems. You see a house that looks like crap, but it's got an old kitchen, it's got an old roof, it's got a foundation problem. That doesn't mean you don't buy it. You just got to put a number on that problem. And so I put numbers on the problems of converting hotels, and what I came to understand was you can buy a hotel in the market where I was looking, and I'll tell you about some other deals I've worked on. You could buy a hotel for $25,000 to $35,000 a unit in a market where multifamily is selling for $150,000 to $180,000 a unit. So you're buying at sometimes 20% to 30, 40% the price of multifamily. And so then I came to understand, when we say hotel conversion, we're not just talking about a physical conversion, right? It's not just adding kitchens. It's not just removing signs. It's not just adding mailboxes. It's a financial conversion. And once that hospitality product becomes multifamily, boom, the value at least triples because it's traded on a much different cap rate. I don't know how familiar you are with much different cap rates. And long story short, it's valued significantly differently. And multifamily is valued a lot higher than hotels are, chiefly because the income is a lot more durable. And then I'm studying the multifamily market. And all the other apartments that I own are more like Class B, Class A, luxury, or a little bit less than full luxury apartments. I'm not an expert in workforce housing, which is why somebody would live in a 300 to 500 square foot hotel room, because it's cheap, right? Like that's the big offering, because it's cheap to buy and it's cheap to live there. So I start researching workforce housing, and I understood that housing prices have been going up, and I understood why. And I understand there's a shortage of workforce housing. And then I really come to understand building something in any major city that rents for less than $1,000 a month is essentially impossible. That was impossible before interest rates skyrocketed upwards just because of the price of permitting and materials and labor, so forth and so on. Now that's really impossible to build. There's not a lot of building going on in general, but what is being built is all A-class luxury stuff. And we can talk about why that is. But the long story short is that's the only thing you can afford to build. And so I realized, wow, you can't afford to build C-class workforce housing. And at the same time, that's where all the demand is. As there's higher interest rates and people getting priced out of starter homes, and the supply of starter homes is also at a record low of new homes being built. And then you combine that with that crowds a bunch of people into the apartment space. More people in apartments means the rents are going up. And the people that were in the A-class apartments are going to the B-class. And the people that were going to the B-class are going to the C-class. And everybody that was living in the C-class is getting squeezed. They don't have anywhere to go. And on top of that, you've got a lot of other syndicators out there that this is their whole goal. Buy the C-class property, get the kitchens changed, get the bathrooms changed, raise the rent, make a bunch of money. That's been going on for decades. So you got all these older apartment complexes getting upgraded, nothing being built, and no affordable housing in most major metros. And then at the same time, and nobody has any real solution to that. And then at the same time, you got hotels. They're not doing so well, these old hotels, especially post-COVID. And you've got hotels that, by the way, they're not doing well post-COVID. And every 5 to 7 years, hotels are required to remodel. They call it a PIP, property improvement plan, that the brand will come out, the franchise will come out and require the hotel to do. So like your Holiday Inn, it's got to get remodeled every 5 to 7 years, the latest and greatest paint colors and sheets, etc., from Holiday Inn. Well, guess what? After 3-4 PIPs, after a couple remodels, it's not worth remodeling the hotel anymore. They just build a new one. Like these old motels that are built in the 70s and 80s, it's just worth building a new one. They don't remodel them. And so when those hotels don't get remodeled, sometimes they take the franchise off. It becomes independently owned, like owned by a mom and pop. And they either mismanage it or don't spend the money that's needed to remodel it. And those things become hubs for crime and derelict behavior. They don't bring in a lot of tax revenue for the city, and cities want them gone. And so in my experience, cities have been very friendly, allowing them to get converted into workforce housing. And I can talk to you about how sometimes you don't even need the city's permission in a couple instances. Some of these are zoned by right to become multifamily, and I can tell you about how to look for that. So I realized this is really perfect storm. You can't build affordable housing because it's too expensive. Affordable housing is where all the demand is, especially in major metros. And at the same time, this is not like multifamily where nobody can find a good deal to buy. Old hotels or mediocre hotels that aren't operating well financially are just everywhere, And sometimes you could even buy extended stay hotels, meaning they've got kitchens in every room. And so the physical changes of the hotel at that place become very minimal. So I'm like, wow, this is the strategy. This is what I need to build a brand around. That is what I need to be focused on. And because it's because it's also the most profitable. And I'll say a couple other things. I thought, and then maybe we can have a little Q&A if you'd like, and I could talk about the details of kind of the operations of what the hotels look like. And like I've done conversions that are very different. Sometimes we gut all the rooms and kind of start from zero. Sometimes they've already got kitchens in them and we kind of lease them up. Some properties, it's kind of a hybrid model where got some apartments in some rooms and hotel rooms in other rooms. And that's all kind of market dependent. But with the hotel, there are lots of amenities that are often not available to people that are looking for a $700, $800, $900 a month apartment, which is a lot, which is very cheap, I should say, in most major cities, right? Like I'm imagining where you all are, it's a lot more affordable than like a major metro, but that kind of rent is unheard of in major metros. And so for example, hotels are usually in great locations, close to retail, close to employment, and close to major thoroughfares. Hotels also have things like gyms, pools, and internet in every room, and TVs in every room. When you buy a hotel, you get the furnishings. Well, those furnishings are essentially worthless on a resale market. So we rent the furnishings too. And I've got one hotel in Texas. Our cable bill is our cable and internet is $12 per month per unit. We turn around and sell a utility package to the residents for $40 a month, which includes a TV, which, by the way, was already in the room when we acquired the property. And that all of that profit, right? That $32 in profit, or I'm sorry, $28 in profit, goes straight to the bottom line. Straight to the bottom line. And of course, $40 a month for internet and TV is way more economical than somebody could go and get on their own, or that's cheaper than if they went and lived in an apartment. And so we also include the utilities so that and most properties, because we don't want to have to spend money segmenting out the utilities. And people really like the idea of it's turnkey. I come in, I got the furnishings, I got the utilities, I got the internet, etc. It's all taken care of. And I pay one price for all that. Now, of course, we make sure it's a price where we don't lose. And we aim to make about 30 to 40% in profit every month off of the utility prices that we charge. This is another opportunity to add to the bottom line that you don't necessarily have in an apartment building. And one more kind of creative value add that I'll share real quick. A lot of hotels have truck parking, like semi-truck parking, and they're close to interstate. Well, in one of our hotels in Houston, it turns out people rent semi-truck parking spaces for $300 to $350 a month. Well, our hotel has got 26 semi-truck parking spaces in the parking lot, and residents do not need all that parking. And so we rent those spaces for $250 a month. And this adds almost 50 grand a year, boom, straight to the bottom line. It costs us essentially nothing to operate. So these things there's all kinds of ways to sell residents additional services and make more money than you could on a traditional apartment. And of course, nobody can compete with you on price because once again, you're buying at $30,000, $40,000 per unit, where apartment buildings are selling for 4 times that much easily. The big boys just can't even compete with you on price. The other thing that I'll mention real quick about what makes these hotels so easy to do, I mean, actually easier, is on the financing side. So at first, I was struggled to get financing for my deals because banks aren't familiar with hotel conversions. You know, if you ever went to a bank, they're very risk averse. They're like insurance companies. They want to put you in a square box and write you the same kind of loan they've written to everybody else and really mitigate their risk. Well, with a hotel conversion, at the first banks I talked to, they didn't know what to do with me. Right? They're like, you want to buy this, and then you want to tear it up and redevelop it. They wanted to write me some very expensive construction loan. But then I realized that what the sophisticated people do is they get the property appraised as a stabilized multifamily. So, for example, I'll take a hotel that has not been converted yet and is not zoned to be apartment building yet. It's not full of residents. And you can have the appraiser appraise the property as if it was a stabilized multifamily. What will this be worth post-conversion? And now all of a sudden you're talking about a value that's probably 3x what you're paying for the property. So then you take that appraisal that says, hey, this $4 million hotel is going to be worth $11 million as an apartment complex. You take that $11 million appraisal and you go down to the bank and say, I'm only looking for a loan to value ratio of 50%. And you can get nearly 100% of the property financed sometimes, depending on if the bank believes that the property will perform well as an apartment building. And if you can't get 100% of it financed, you don't have to bring as much money to the table as you do sometimes in with a traditional multifamily purchase. So all of that's led me to say I am focused exclusively on hotel conversion. That's a real high level overview of what's going on. I will maybe while you all are thinking of some questions, I'll show you. Um, I want to show you. Um, I want to show you a couple pieces of. I want to show you some data on. I want to show you some data on housing just for a second here. The first thing I'll show you here, let me share my screen so you can see it. First thing I'll show you. So this is some data from Fred, which is just the Federal Reserve's data source. And that actually comes from the St. Louis Fed, or Federal Reserve out there in your state. And this is mixed with some data from Housing and Urban Development and HUD. And this shows privately owned housing units that have been completed each year. This is total housing units, okay? New privately owned housing units. We don't have this segmented out to include just multifamily, which I'll show you in just a second. I'll show you new construction of 4 or more unit properties. But what I want you to note here is not only is it pretty flat, but we're right now building houses at the same pace, the same number of houses, not just pace, same number of units of houses we're building right now. And this is actually data that's from April 2023. It's even lower today as interest rates have fallen some more. We are building houses at the same rate that we were in 1995, right? And we have a heck of a lot more people than we did in 1995. That alone ought to be explaining to you why housing is so expensive right now. Let me show you another graph real quick. And I'm glad to, if you want to have all of these slides, certainly glad to send them over to you all. Where's my housing starts of multiple units? Here's my, well, maybe I don't have that one. I thought I had it. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Here is private housing starts. Here's average. This is average square feet for 2 or more units, by the way. I'll show you this and I'm going to show you another one. So check this out. Average square foot per unit also falling. Been falling every year since 2008. That, in my opinion, is because of the price of construction going on. Units are getting smaller and smaller. Single person households, that is people that live alone, that is also at a record high. And that has been increasing every year since the 70s. Also, let me show you this one. So we saw that we're building about the same number of units we did in 1995. We saw that we are building them smaller and smaller. And let me also just show you that we're spending more money on construction than ever before. There's total construction spending. Record high construction spending for the same number of houses that we're getting or same number of residential real estate that we're getting in 1995. Super expensive, and the supply is not keeping up with demand. And you wonder why all the A-class stuff is what's being built. Well, let me just show you. there's a record number now of people that are renters that are earning over $150,000 a year. I understand in your market that kind of person probably doesn't exist, but this is a record high. 2.6 million people in the United States earning over $150,000 a year are renters. And and not only that, but based on this chart I've got here on the right, if you look at rent as a percentage of people's incomes, we used to have this, or we have this metric in real estate economics called the cost burden renters. And those are the renters that are spending more than 30% of their income a month on rent. So the number of cost burden renters has gone just like this. It's just gone straight up over the last 10 years. And they've come up with this new category. They call it the severely cost burden renters, people
Hello?
spending more than 50% of their income on
Yes,
rent.
this is correct.
And that number of people spending more than 50% of their income on rent is also going straight up. Both of those numbers are at a record high right now. And the sad part is nobody really has any idea how to solve this except for just throw more government money, more subsidies at the problem. And of course, at the end of the day, that'll just end up making housing more expensive. So um, kind of to summarize, then I'm happy to take your questions, and I'm happy to tell you about some of the more details of my projects. But if you think about all the reasons why multifamily is a good investment, like in my mind, there are six big reasons why it's a great investment. There's growing housing demand for apartments and shrinking supply. In big apartment buildings, you can do things like syndication and use other kinds of creative financing to pool people's money together and get a big building. Um, the property gets valued based on the income. You're not just tied to whatever the values are in that market, like with a single family home. There's options for really good fixed rate long term debt. And of course, we're all invested in real estate because we know it's a real asset that Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Google, Facebook, they're not going to come up with a product that's going to destroy a demand for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Everybody's at a point in life where they need a $800 to $1,000 a month 2 bedroom apartment. I don't know what technology is going to destroy that demand. They're recession resistant. As the economy slows, there's even more demand for the 1 and 2 bedroom workforce apartments. It improves people's lives and it gives us monthly cash flow. Well, hotel conversions do all of these things even better than regular apartments do, I would argue. And like I'll tell you, so I'm an economics professor, and my license plate says free market. Okay, like I teach students about markets, and so I'm not I'm not the typical college professor in that regard. And I worry that a lot of students, they graduate, and they, even though I've tried to talk to them about business and capitalism and free markets and these kind of things that I'm sure everybody on this call has some affinity for, I worry that they graduate, they get the first job, they're only earning 35, 45 grand a year at that entry level job. And then they got to spend a third of their income on rent. And then they say, shit, this free market stuff is stacked against me, right? This capitalism stuff hurts the little guy at the expense of the big guy. And I worry that if housing, it's most people's biggest expense. And as that gets more and more expensive, that makes it harder for people in their early career to be able to save and get ahead. And that leads to less autonomy in their lives. And I worry that that sours them on free markets and all the benefits that come from that. And so I love the idea of being able to provide affordable housing so that the people that just graduated, they can live with the utilities and the internet and everything included in a smaller space, but in a great location for only $800 a month. And I don't need any government subsidies to provide that affordable housing, right? So I'll cut it off there. It's kind of my job to just like talk and talk and talk for 75 minutes at a time. So let me cut it off there, and we can take some questions and get into a little more specifics.
And Ariel's asking at the beginning of the meeting, you spoke on a conference. Do you know
Mm,
what conference was that?
yeah, that they call it the best ever conference.
Okay.
And it's a good, yeah, it's kind of an expensive ticket. Um, it might be like $700 or something. But it's a good, well worth it. Well worth it. I'm going to go there again this year, and I've gone in the past, and I got a lot of value out of it. I mean, look, I got my hotel conversion idea from going to that conference.
Right.
Worth it. Yeah, worth it, Ariel. Worth it. You got to think of it as an investment, right? It's not an expense. These conferences are an investment in yourself.
All right, guys. What questions do you have? So do you
I was going
what
to ask,
kind go ahead.
I guess on the conversion too. Oh, I was just going to ask about the construction cost. I mean, of just converting it over to hotel to apartment. That you touched on that a little bit, like you may come out ahead, but I guess just touch on that a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, sure, sure. Um, so there, I would say that if you've got a hotel room with pretty good bathrooms, you're not looking to redo the bathrooms, and we're just looking to add kitchens to the rooms. Um, and by the way, we're just talking about kitchenettes. So usually two burner cooktop, nice big microwave, medium to small size fridge, no dishwasher, right? We're not talking about like L-shaped kitchen with a bar, and most hotel rooms just aren't big enough for that. But you can get away with as low as 5 to 7 thousand per kitchen, and I think that if you want to budget in some for bathrooms, some other things, like if the hotel's in kind of rough shape, I think a good number is kind of like $10,000 per unit. That's a good starting place.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
On your management and such, you have your own, how do you set that up? Your maintenance, your management, all those things.
Great question. So, in some properties, what we do is we in some properties what we do is while we're leasing up the hotel units, or I'm sorry, yeah, while we're leasing up the apartment units, we continue to operate the building as a hotel. We just kind of section off. Property managers working on leasing these 10 rooms at a time, and the rest of them are open to be operated as a hotel. So that creates kind of a complicated management situation because most hotel managers don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
do multifamily leasing and vice versa. But we only do that for like I don't do that on every property, just on some. So for example, right now I'm buying a 29 unit motel that will become a multifamily. And so just to give you a sense on some of the numbers there, I'm buying that for 1.45 million, and the stabilized multifamily value is about 3.3 million. And that's after only about 12-ish thousand dollars a door in construction, right? Huge, huge gains. So 29 units, I can lease those up pretty quickly. In that market, I could easily, in the market where that property is, I can lease about 10, 12 units a month very easily. So I'm not looking at a lot of vacancy after construction, and therefore we're not going to run that as a hotel. Now, I got another 110 unit in Houston, Texas that I'm closing end of October, beginning of November. We're also going to be able to lease up there like 10 to 12 units a month. So I can't have 100 units sitting empty. And like that's a lot of units to sit empty, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense to hire a second set of management, a hotel manager. Even if that person ends up, you have to kind of overpay them, right? Well, we'll hire a second manager to run the hotel portion just so we can get money coming in off of those rooms as we are leasing up the others. And what we'll do is we'll have a pretty high nightly rate. Like it won't be a competitive nightly rate because we don't really care about having nightly customers. We'll have a very competitive, though, weekly rate. And people will come in weekly, they'll like it, and we'll turn them into long-term tenants.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
How many units do you currently have?
Units, I have to count them up. Right now, 140 in Louisville, 110 in Virginia, 110 in Houston. Working on that 30 unit in Michigan, and I've done another 80 unit in San Antonio and another 150 unit in Michigan.
So are you outsourcing everything, or do you have in like staff that's actually a part of your team?
So for property management, we outsource the property management 100%. And so, when you're doing small multifamily, like I started off buying the duplexes and fourplexes and that kind of thing, right? And it really made sense for me to manage it myself. Like my first 3 dozen properties, like I managed it myself, right? Um and that's because like if you want to hire management just for a 4 unit in a small town, it can be pretty darn expensive. Sometimes they want 10% of your rents and then they want to get paid on renewal. But when you get to management at this level, like 50 units and up, management fee is about 3% of gross rents. And then you just pay the payroll for the manager. So the management is significantly more economical when you get to that scale. Yeah, so we pay a 3 to 3.5% plus the management payroll, plus maintenance staff payroll. Need about one maintenance person per 100 units. That's why I really like to get 80, 100 units and up. Really, the bigger the property, the better. As long as the market can absorb it, meaning we can lease them up fast enough. And then that those leasing agents and those maintenance people, they work for the property management company. So I got one person to talk to at the property management company, right? I don't like what they're doing, and I got one person talks to me, and I give all my feedback to one person, and that's the way I would recommend to think about it.
How much on average is the management payroll a year?
So that does depend on the city, but like I'll just give you Houston for example. So that's at that property we're doing 3.5%. We're gross rents collected. And by the way, also I always want to pay them. I don't want to squeeze these people on what I pay them, right? Because I want them there and happy and doing a good job because our
Right.
operation is very dependent on them, right? So I actually don't pay 3.5% on just the rents collected. I pay 3.5% on all income, right? So that way they are incentivized to get out there and think about other things and ways, other things to charge tenants for, and other ways to bring in revenue. And I want them to feel like they're part of the team on that part of things. But you asked about their payroll. So the leasing agent there, I think is so I think her salary is like in the low 50,000s. Total payroll is about 70,000 for the leasing office. Now, in the beginning, we brought in like a second leasing person on the weekends at some properties to help try and accelerate the leasing. And then I think the total payroll for maintenance people is about 40,000. And so I think their salaries in the mid 30s, plus there's some workers' comp and payroll taxes, et cetera, on that.
Sure.
Yeah. And but what was the other thing I was going to say about the payroll? Yeah, about one leasing person, one maintenance person. Oh, I was just gonna say, like, if you're doing when you're doing kind of calculations, these are just like I said, like $10,000 a unit construction was kind of a good rule of thumb. Another good rule of thumb, just and again, just a rule of thumb, right? So it's just like if you want to do back of the envelope calculation on a hotel, take your gross potential rent, like number of units times the rent times 12 months, and just cut that in half or multiply it by about 55%. You can assume that your expenses will be somewhere between 40 and 50% of the gross income of the property. And that'll give you a shockingly accurate estimate to what the net income is going to be after paying the payroll, the taxes, and management, etc.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Sometimes these hotel managers, if I want to run the place as a hotel temporarily, will pay the hotel manager 5, 6, 7 grand a month. And I mean that's a lot, but that could absolutely be worth it if you've got 90 rooms for them to get occupied, right? And if they can get those 90 rooms occupied for $70 a night, they quickly pay for themselves.
Right.
Levi's calling in from like Florida. Isn't that the breakers in the background, Levi?
So that's the Flagler Hotel,
Oh, Flagler Hotel. Is that still in Florida?
St. Augustine. Yep.
Okay, cool, cool. Like Henry Flagler, the guy that built the railroad down to the
Yep.
Keys. Yeah,
Yep.
cool, cool.
Chris, isn't that cool?
What else? Yes, real cool. We get to see it every
Wait till
week.
Levi's buying that one next week.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that would make sense as a conversion though. That might make more money as a hotel.
What's the smallest market you're in?
um, the smallest I'm in is where I live in Grand Rapids. It's about 1.5 million people, but we the cool thing about this strategy is it's almost kind of better in small markets. Like no one's going in to build more affordable housing in small markets. And if there's an older hotel off an interstate in a small market, that's there's not a lot of demand for that, right? So if there's a small market that you know really well and there's a 30, 40 unit hotel, like nobody's buying that 30, 40 unit hotel to put a Marriott name on it, right? The economies of scale are just not there. And if you know there's a real shortage of workforce housing in that market, or if you know, hey, there's a real shortage of Section 8 to where you can go down to the city and say, hey, if I give you guys 30, 40 units in this hotel, put kitchens in them, can I get 30, 40 Section 8 vouchers instantly? And I've had good luck with that. So you can make this work in a small market. You've just got to be someone that really knows that market, right? And so from afar, usually that's not me, the expert on a small market that I don't live in.
I've seen several of these for sale in like really, really small markets, like, 2,000 people or less.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I
it's
don't,
tough to
that's
evaluate.
tough.
It's just tough. I see a lot. I was actually looking at one this morning in New Mexico, and this was an extended stay hotel. It was um like 40 rooms. And so when I say extended stay, I mean it's got kitchens in every room already, which is just makes the construction really straightforward, right? Usually the big costs are some cities make you add sprinklers and then add the kitchens. So it had the kitchens in every room, was like 40 units, and this hotel was under $2 million. But the town was, I don't think it was quite as small as 2,000 people, but it was small, and it's like you got to really know that market. But if you know the market, there are some screaming deals out there. That's for sure.
How do you find the property management at that rate? I love how you incentivize them. That's very great leadership. But how do you find local property management that are willing to drop their rate and be incentivized like that? Do you go to
Yeah.
already created property management, or do you try to create your own property management for that facility?
So that is such a great question. I would say like versus on the create your own versus go and hire some, just in general, you want to think about like what's your long-term goal? Like is the long-term goal to scale? If the long-term goal is to scale, I don't know that you want to make your own. And unless you want to be in the property management business, right? And especially if it's in a market where you don't live or you don't know real well, then you want to go out and hire them. This is the other good thing about looking in markets that are larger is you're going to have lots of property management options. So if there is not good property management in a market, we may not buy the property, right? Because that's just a critical piece of what's going on. So when we're doing due diligence, by the way, what's great about this is like, you put a contract on a house, maybe you got 10 days to inspect it, or with a multifamily, like a bigger apartment building, maybe you have 2, 3 weeks to inspect it. All right. Imagine this. Very common in the hotel world to ask for 90 to 120 days. You got all kinds of time. And you tell them, I need time to meet with the banks, meet with the construction firms, meet with the city, get the zoning worked out. And what that time gives you is time to, one, raise the money. And then two, that gives you time to interview property management. So we'll immediately, once I get something under contract, then I'll create like a little summary of the property, like, hey, here's how many rooms and the address, and here's what we're trying to do, so forth and so on. And I'll send that out to as many property managers as I can find in the area, along with a questionnaire. Like, could you please answer these 10 questions for me? And if you want, send me an email. I'm glad to send you the questionnaire. And the questionnaire is I wanna see how well they do because this is kind of like pre-interviewing them. So I don't have to get on the phone with 20 different people. And we'll look over their responses and then I'll quiz them on the market. How quickly can you get these rented? How much do you think these can rent for? What kind of bonus structure would be interesting to you guys? Like how about we give you a bonus if you rent more than 10 a month or something? And if they're not interested in bonuses, then pardon my language again, then they've put bullshit in their numbers, right? To try and win your business. But back to your core. So the long answer is how do you find these people? We send out tons of emails and interview property managers before we close. We're going to markets where there's lots of different management options. And then two, that 3.5% plus payroll, that's very standard in the large, that's very standard 60 plus unit world. They will not be shocked at that kind of structure whatsoever. And however, back to the question about a smaller market, like I know a lot of people here may be in a smaller market. For 29 units, you could absolutely consider managing that yourself or hiring somebody part-time, right? So that you're not paying that 10% of rents because that could really hurt.
Right. We got any other questions?
Have you run into any, I guess, major issues with your projects on when you've gone to doing the rezoning process? And
Yes,
have you?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, by the way, just to make it clear, like all the contracts are contingent on rezoning approval. So
Okay.
I don't close on it unless the zoning gets approved. And I'll tell you, I was in this town, Lufkin, Texas, in August, late July. And I was looking at a 39 unit property there. Um, Great price, like 20 grand a unit. There's a shortage of affordable housing. About half the units already had kitchens. Great project, great location, right in the middle of town. And the city said, yeah, we don't want there to be an apartment there. And I'm like, why? And they say, well, there's not enough parking. Some cities want 1.5 spaces per unit. And I'm like, well, they're studio units. Like, this is an old hotel full of heroin addicts. Like, don't you want us to come in and clean it up and get some more affordable housing in the community? And they would not even sit down at City Hall. I went in a conference room and sat down trying to meet with them. They came in the room. They wouldn't even sit down and talk to me. They were absolutely not. We are not changing the zoning. And they clearly, they have a lot of these city planners, they have a vision for a building to become something else, right? So when that happens, then we just pull out. We're like, yeah, we're sorry. The owner was real disappointed, which I understand, but nothing we can do. So I look for cities where I know they're more business friendly and they know and they want affordable housing. So sometimes what I'll do is a lot of cities have a strategic plan online, and I'll just do like a control F, word search in their strategic plan, and I'll look for the words adaptive reuse. That means converting one building to another, or zoning change, or affordable housing. Because if it's in their city strategic plan to create more affordable housing, then they're really going to be open to allowing me to make the change. This happened in Columbus, Ohio, 2 weeks ago. I was on the phone with the city council. They said, absolutely not. We're not allowing this. I'm like, okay. Columbus, Ohio, no. Lufkin, Texas, no. Houston, Texas, totally different story. So they don't have zoning laws. Where I live, Grand Rapids, Michigan, they're like, oh, yeah, we want more affordable housing. You could do whatever you want. Louisville, they're like, oh, yeah, we want to do whatever you want. We want more affordable housing. I know Denver is open to it. So you just gotta find the markets. Another cool strategy, though, is if you find a property that maybe it's too expensive for you, or you don't have the network to call on investors and close on it, once you get it zoned to multifamily, that property is worth a ton of money. And you can wholesale that property to somebody that's doing hotel conversion, like a developer. You can wholesale that to them for that purchase contract, for a lot of money.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, as we look at wrapping things up, Alex, what's the best way to connect with you? I'm sure there'll be some more questions afterwards. We're going to, of course, post this in our group, but what's the best way for folks to connect?
Yeah, sure. I'll put my email here in the chat. Alex Cartwright at Vilicus.capital. And you're welcome to send me an email there about anything real estate related. And you go to our website, Vilicus Capital. You can sign up to be on our mailing list and see about the kind of projects we're working on, different things we're doing. And sometimes I'm partnering with other people that are doing hotel conversion. I send out updates about those projects. And if you're interested in just real estate economics in general, I have a reading group that meets online via Zoom once a week. We're about to start a new book and it's all people that are interested in real estate, but also want to learn more economics and learn how to make sense of the data and really take their investing game to the next level. And so if you're interested in being part of that group, you can send me an email and I can get you linked up to that as well.
Awesome. And how often do you go through a book? Is it a month at a time?
We do it. It depends on here. I'll show you the book we're doing right now.
Okay.
So like we are, it just kind of depends on the book. Like we're doing this book right now called 50 Economics Classics, which is the greatest, like most popular, well-read books in economics of the last 100 years, like distilled down into like 4 pages, like 4 pages per book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been great because it gives people opportunity to learn a lot of economics without having to read 1,000 pages each. But so like those chapters are so short, we've been doing 3 a week. And so we do a book about every month and a half. And this is a book we're starting. I did it last year. We started again next week, and then next we're doing this new book that just came out called Excluded, which is about zoning laws and zoning law policy in the United States. And then my next book is this book on strategy, which is just phenomenally interesting. Everybody should get that, which is based on the most popular course that is taught at Yale, a history course. And it's all about
Awesome.
all about different people trying at different strategies and different trials in their life, mostly throughout the ancient times. But there's just a ton of lessons for today. And so everybody that's in the group is interested in real estate in some way, and they're all trying to read economics and understand. We'll talk about recent economic data that came out and talk about specifically, like, what does that mean if you're a real estate investor, right? And so people, it's a good group to be a part of if you're into real estate, but also kind of curious, like reading, and want to develop your analytical abilities.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, we want to thank you for your time today and spending some time with us and sharing. So appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to talk with you all. And send me an email. I know Nick and Anthony didn't hear from you, Anthony, we did hear from you. Mandy and Nick didn't hear from you, but certainly send me an email if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again.
And best ever conference, Ariel. Maybe I'll see you there. It's a good place. Everybody should go to that.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to you later.
All right. Talk to you later.